Okay, I want to talk about extractability for AI assistants. I'm going to go through 11 tips that you can use for your SEO, GEO content creation. So basically, extractability refers to how easily AI assistants can understand useful passages from your content and then use them as part of AI generated answers. So if you're a customer of like Profound, they have an academy that you can go through, and they actually talk about this, and they talk about a pipeline in one of their courses where it's content should be fetchable, and then it's chosen, and then it's extractable. So that extractability piece, that third piece, is what we're talking about here. And this is the article I've written with 11 tips on how to make your content extractable. So the first part is write self-contained passages. So basically passages that can be understood in isolation. So if you were to take a chunk of your content arbitrarily, remove it from the page, could you read that and then understand what it's talking about, or would you need surrounding context? So I have examples here. I'm not going to read these, but basically in one of them, it uses a lot of pronouns, and it basically references like previous knowledge in the article. Whereas the self-contained passage, it can be understood on its own in isolation. And this is important for chunkability and extractability, as we're talking about. The second one is put the answer before the explanation. So this applies in two senses. One, it applies on a page level. You want to use the inverted pyramid structure, where you're talking about your main idea first, and then you go down into more supporting detail as you move down the article or the page. And then we're also talking about it in the context of individual paragraphs or passages, where you want to use a bluff writing style, which means bottom line up front, where you're talking about your key information right after your main heading. So I have examples of this as well. Basically, in one of them, the information is kind of scattered throughout the passage, and the other one, it gets straight to the point, and then it gives you supporting details afterwards. Tip number 3 is name your entities. So entities are identifiable people, places, or things. You want to mention your entities and related entities in your content as opposed to using vague pronouns, just to give your writing like more informational robustness and depth. So for example, one with vague pronouns would be like it can crawl web pages and use them to help generate answers for users. Whereas one with named entities would be like OpenAI's search bot can crawl web pages that may appear in ChatGPT search results. So it's naming the name of the crawler, it's naming the name of the AI assistant, and naming the entities. Tip number 4 is keep one main idea per passage. So this is pretty straightforward, but don't mix a lot of ideas into one paragraph or passage. Keep it focused on one main idea. So just do that. Don't expand, like start talking about one thing and then go into something else. Keep your passages kind of like coherent with one main idea. And you can kind of see I'm doing that in this article where each section of content refers only to that tip. I'm not talking about like multiple tips within different sections. Use descriptive headings. So pretty straightforward, but instead of having a heading like benefits, you'd have a more descriptive heading like benefits of self-contained passages for AI extractability. Basically getting more at the heart of what the paragraph or the sections of information under that heading are actually about, as opposed to being sort of general. And this will give your readers and the machines a better knowledge of what your sections are about. Tip number 6 is use semantic triples to make relationships explicit. So semantic triples are subject, predicate, object, and it's just a way to make relationships clear in your writing. So for example, a less explicit sentence would be external sources get used by it to generate answers. A sentence using semantic triples would be ChatGPT search uses web sources to support AI generated answers. So it's subject, predicate, and then object. Tip number 7 is to use lists, tables, and structured formats where appropriate. So pretty straightforward again, but lists and tables are very easy to understand by users and machines because of their structured format. So you don't want to overdo it and force content into these structures if it doesn't make sense. Where, for example, I have less structured content here listing a bunch of different tools and how they help. You could easily just put that into a table. It makes it much more scannable, much more extractable. Tip number 8 is ensure information is in accessible HTML versus an image is or client-side rendered JavaScript. So in this case, I have an example of an image where I have an image with a bunch of text in it. Basically, search engines, but especially AI assistants, they're going to have to devote more resources to understand the text in this image, and they may not do it. And we're all familiar with the limitations of client-side rendered JavaScript for AI assistants. So again, I just have this in a nice table. And of course, you could design this table to be more stylized if that's what you're looking for. Or you could just add context around the image. There's different ways to do it, especially with alt text, the image file name, and then maybe some context below the image or above it, depending on what makes the most sense for your readers. Tip number 9 is to support claims with evidence. So don't just make a claim, but make a claim, state where it comes from, state the importance of the claim, and then link to it if it has an external source. So you can see that I did that here in the supported claim example. I linked to the source from OpenAI that actually supports this claim that's being made. Tip number 10 is use specificity in your language. So things like dates, percentages, locations, measurements, qualifications, basically add a lot of rich detail to make your writing more informationally dense, but also understandable, both for readers as well as machines. And then the final tip is to avoid boilerplate. So we basically want a high signal to noise ratio where there's a lot of informational density in the content, and basically every word has a purpose. We're not adding anything extraneous that would be considered like extra or unnecessary. The last tip I have here is just remember that extractability doesn't mean citability. Your content may be highly extractable, but an AI assistant still needs to determine that the passage is useful and relevant enough to include in an answer. So for a tip, focus on incorporating proprietary information that gives your content unique value and will increase the odds that an AI assistant will decide to use it as part of its answer later. And then lastly, just remember that your content can't be chosen and extracted if it's not fetchable. So pay attention to all of the important technical SEO fundamentals, like ensuring you're not blocking crawlers and robots.txt and things like that. So those are my 11 tips for content extractability. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have any questions, please let me know. And thank you for your time. Peace.